There are some kinds of loneliness that don't arrive after heartbreak. They don't come after betrayal, screaming arguments, or someone walking out the door. Some loneliness arrives quietly, while everything still looks completely normal from the outside. And before this story begins, before you decide who was right and who was wrong, I want you to ask yourself something honestly. Have you ever looked at someone you loved and realized you no longer knew what they were thinking? Have you ever sat across from someone at dinner, hearing their voice, seeing their face, yet feeling emotionally miles away from them? If stories like this interest you, stories about marriage, emotional distance, silent pain, and the truths people hide behind forced smiles, then subscribe to the channel right now. Because here, we don't tell perfect love stories. We tell real ones. The uncomfortable ones. The kind that slowly creep into your life without warning. And trust me, this story is not about one dramatic moment that destroyed everything. It's about something far more dangerous. Silence. My name is Lucy Anderson, and when this story started, I was 33 years old, living in a quiet little town in Michigan where nothing ever seemed to change. It was the kind of town where people still waved at strangers while driving past them. The kind of place where the cashier at the grocery store remembered your favorite snacks, your birthday, and sometimes even your problems. Life moved slowly there. Predictably. Comfortably. Seasons arrived exactly when they were supposed to. Almost like the town itself was afraid of surprises. Winter covered the streets in heavy silence. Spring carried that faint smell of rain and new beginnings. Summer evenings stretched forever beneath golden sunsets, while autumn wrapped everything in orange leaves and nostalgia. For years, I thought that kind of stability was a blessing. I didn't realize yet that a life without change can slowly become a life without feeling. I worked as a high school guidance counselor. Every morning, teenagers walked into my office carrying invisible weight on their shoulders. Anxiety, pressure, family problems, identity struggles, fear about the future. Some cried openly. Some laughed nervously while talking about things that were obviously breaking them inside. Others just stared at the floor, trying to find words for emotions they didn't fully understand yet. And every day, I listened. I told them it was okay to feel lost. I told them confusion didn't make them weak. I told them silence could become dangerous if it lasted too long. The strange thing was, I was giving advice I couldn't follow myself. Because after those students left my office and the door clicked shut behind them, I would often sit there alone in complete silence, staring at the wall longer than I should have. Not because I was tired, but because somewhere deep inside me, something felt empty, and I didn't know how to explain it. From the outside, my life looked almost perfect. I had a respected job, a beautiful home, and a marriage that had lasted nearly a decade. People admired us. "Lucy, you're so lucky. You and Mark are such a stable couple. You two never fight." That last one was true. We almost never fought. But people don't realize something important about relationships. The absence of conflict does not always mean the presence of love. Sometimes it simply means two people stop trying to understand each other. My husband, Mark Anderson, worked in technology. Most of his life existed behind computer screens, lines of code, spreadsheets, and endless projects that followed him home every evening. Mark wasn't a bad man. That's what made everything harder. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't manipulative. He wasn't unfaithful. He never yelled at me. Never insulted me. Never gave me a reason dramatic enough to justify the growing emptiness inside our marriage. He was simply distant. Quiet in a way that slowly consumed every room he walked into. Mark believed silence prevented conflict. If something felt uncomfortable, he ignored it. If something hurt him emotionally, he buried it under routine. And if a problem couldn't be solved logically, he preferred pretending it didn't exist at all. For years, I convinced myself that was normal. At first, our relationship had warmth. Real warmth. We used to stay awake late into the night talking about everything. Dreams. Fears. Ridiculous future plans we were probably never going to achieve. Back then, even silence between us felt comforting. But over time, things changed so slowly that neither of us noticed it happening. That's the dangerous thing about emotional distance. It rarely arrives all at once. It builds quietly in ordinary moments. In shorter conversations. In distracted responses. In the gradual disappearance of curiosity. We still ate dinner together every night. We still slept in the same bed. We still asked each other practical questions. How was work? Did you pay the electricity bill? What time will you be home tomorrow? But those conversations felt less like connection and more like maintenance. Like two co-workers managing the same household. Some nights we sat on the same couch for hours without speaking. The television filled the room with noise while something invisible grew between us. Distance. At night, we slept facing opposite directions. Sometimes our backs touched briefly beneath the blankets. But even then it felt like there were miles separating us. No anger. No screaming. No dramatic breakdowns. Just absence. And honestly, absence can hurt more than cruelty sometimes. Because cruelty at least reminds you the other person still feels something. Absence makes you wonder if you've slowly become invisible. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions I was too afraid to answer honestly. Is this what marriage becomes after enough years? Does love naturally fade into routine? Am I expecting too much? Or am I disappearing inside this relationship without realizing it? The worst part was that nothing looked wrong from the outside. That made it harder to trust my own feelings. I kept telling myself I should be grateful. We had stability. We had security. We had peace. But peace without emotional connection eventually starts feeling like emotional isolation. And isolation changes people quietly. I became quieter at home. I stopped sharing details about my day, because Mark barely reacted anymore when I did. At first, he used to ask follow-up questions. He used to care about the little stories I brought home from work. But eventually his responses became shorter. That's crazy. That's good. I'm sorry. Simple words spoken while staring at his phone or laptop screen. Over time, I stopped trying. And what I didn't realize back then was that Mark noticed the change too. He saw me becoming distant. He noticed my forced smiles. The silence during dinner. The way I stopped reaching for his hand without even realizing it. But instead of talking about it, he retreated further into himself. Not because he didn't care, but because he genuinely didn't know how to fix something emotional. So he did what felt safest. Nothing. And I did the same. Two people silently waiting for the other to speak first. Two people hurting in different ways inside the same house. Neither of us understanding that silence itself had become the biggest problem in our marriage. Then one evening, something happened that should have been small. So small, honestly, that another couple might have forgotten about it within minutes. But for me, it became the moment I finally understood how far apart we had drifted. It was a Thursday night in late October. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows while cold wind rattled the trees outside. I had spent most of the day emotionally drained after helping one of my students through a panic attack at school. By the time I got home, I felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. I remember standing in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner while the television murmured quietly from the living room where Mark sat working on his laptop. And suddenly, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I realized how lonely the room felt. Not empty. Lonely. There's a difference. A room can be full of people and still feel emotionally abandoned. I looked toward the living room doorway and watched Mark typing without looking up once. The blue glow from his screen reflected against his face while rain continued falling outside. And something inside me cracked just enough to make me speak. Can we talk tonight? The words were simple. Soft. Almost careful. Mark didn't look away from the screen immediately. About what? He asked. I remember drying my hands slowly on a kitchen towel, trying to organize emotions I had buried for years. About us, I said quietly. That finally made him look up. And for a second, I saw something cross his face. Not anger. Not annoyance. Fear. Very small. Very brief. But it was there. And somehow that scared me more than if he had shouted at me. Because deep down, I think both of us already knew this conversation had been waiting for years.